Okay. Good afternoon. Please continue eating your lunch during this presentation, but give me your immediate attention. I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker today, Dr. Jose Fierro. He's going to be speaking to us on the role of technology in the flipped classroom and flipped learning. Jose is the president of Cerritos College in Los Angeles County, which is located in the college is in Norwalk, California. But prior to that, I knew him at Laramie County Community College, where he was the academic vice president and my immediate supervisor. Without further ado, Jose, I'm going to turn the microphone over to you.
Good afternoon. Hello. Hello. Good afternoon. Thank you. It's glad to be here. I'm glad to be here. It's great to be here. I went for a run this morning, as I usually do every morning, get up and go for a run. So I got up, I went for a run, and I started, and I was like, oh, I feel great. So I kept running, and I sped up a little bit more, and by the time I hit the return point, I was just huffing and puffing, because obviously I have lost a lot of my red blood cells since I moved away from this area. But it's great to be here running. This morning was amazing, and driving in late yesterday afternoon, it was great again. I was looking through the windows. The only thing that I could think of is like, gosh, I didn't bring my mountain bike. I could have been out there, so it's good. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the flipped classroom and flipped learning. We obviously had talked a lot about this for the last couple of years, and it's becoming more ubiquitous in the different classrooms. However, not quite as common in higher education. So it's moving up rather quickly, but it's not. The concept is not fully embraced just yet in higher education. Perhaps in this room it's different, since obviously this is a technology conference and most of you are probably technology fans. But when you look at the general classrooms, you probably don't see the flipped classroom quite as evident as you probably should based on different trends. So, as Les mentioned, I used to be the Vice President of Academic Affairs at Laramie County Community College. I was really sad to go, but I had an opportunity to become a president at Cerritos College in California, which has been also a great learning experience for me. But as I said, it's always great to be back. And before I moved to Wyoming, there was a president of an institution that is no longer here in Wyoming that said, oh yeah, you will either like it or you will not, but you will find out really quickly. But once you're there for a while, there is always something that is going to tie you back to Wyoming. And I didn't really understand that until now when I came back, and it's like, oh, I guess he was right. You really miss the place and the connection with Wyoming. So, flipped learning, usually people say, just put some lectures online and do some homework in the classroom, and that's the flipped classroom. And that is how many people implement the flipped classroom. So then you wait a few months, and then you start seeing the results not getting any better, but actually the other way. So the students really not getting the material, and obviously faculty getting frustrated because switching the lectures outside of the classroom and just doing homework in the classroom doesn't really work quite as well. So you find all kinds of lectures online for multiple things, right? So how many of you think it's kind of nuts learn how to ski by watching YouTube videos? Is anyone that has had the experience of learning how to ski watching YouTube videos? Very good. Anyone else? We have at least one. Well, as you see, they are complete lectures, right? Different types of things, and they go all the way from learning how to put your skis on to very advanced slalom, jumping, anything you can find is there. And the truth is, it's not quite as crazy. When I lived in Florida, obviously there's no mountains or snow there. So when I lived in Florida, I was invited to a ski trip. And I always wanted to go, but obviously I didn't know how to ski. The closest was water skiing. So I said, sure, I'll go. not a big deal. And I started watching YouTube videos, actually, just like this. And then I ended up going to the ski trip. And it wasn't quite exactly how I anticipated by watching videos, but it did help a lot because I knew, at least in theory, in concept, what to do, what type of questions to ask to the people that knew how to ski. Right? So the topic, when I got to the topic, I knew what the topic was. I knew how to get my skis on. I knew the type of skis that I needed to rent, everything. I knew all those pieces. You know, I knew how to brake, you know, the different pieces that a skier will know. The only problem is that I knew the theory, but I had no idea of the implementation, which was pretty obvious once I got down the first slope. But after I fell a few times, when I started getting the hang of it, and as I said, I started asking the right questions. So I was using the people that went with me to the trip, like the instructors. And they were giving me directions as to how to actually use the knowledge that I had acquired outside of the classroom, right, to ski. And I did actually a couple of days there, and by then, I wasn't a pro, but it was good enough that I could go up and down most of the slopes. You can do also swimming. Now, there's a whole collection of YouTube videos, actually pretty decent, on swimming. So you see, you know, all kinds of swimming for, like, for instance, I'm a triathlete. So there's a different way that you should swim in open water versus how you swim in a pool, how you pace yourself, how you look into the direction you're trying to go. And I became a triathlete in a very odd way. I was watching TV, flipping to the channels, and I saw the Ironman Kona being broadcast, right? And they always put the race, but on the other side, they always put this sad story of this person that, you know, went through all kinds of adversity, probably an amputee or, you know, something that is very sad. So you connect with the show because watching a whole bunch of people run and swim really is not that interesting unless you're actually doing it. So you start seeing this story, so you connect with the story. So I start watching it, and my wife asked me, what are you watching? And I said, the Kona Ironman, this is great, look at this person. So she sat there, and she said, wow, that must be really tough to do. And I said, yeah, I can do that. And she said, oh, really, can you? And I said, yeah, I'm going to start training. So I became a triathlete. The problem with that was, yes, I was a runner. And I knew how to ride a bike. I wasn't a cyclist, but I was a runner. But I had no idea how to really swim proficiently. I sort of was able to stay afloat on the water without swimming. So I needed to, you know, get a little better at this. And because good decisions, just like the one that I was going to become a triathlete by watching TV, are followed by even better decisions of saying, oh, really, I'm going to prove you wrong. Let me register right away into a triathlon. So I did that. It wasn't an Ironman, but it was a triathlon. Open water, ocean, so I didn't know how to swim properly. So I started watching videos as to how I needed to swim. And that, obviously, this here is me, and I know because I was struggling for air after I did my first, my first lap. This was actually here in Wyoming. And was by watching videos, but then as I start going to trainings and to the pools, I start same thing that I did with the skiing, asking people, do I have to do, is my catch okay, my return okay, the recoup time, am I breathing okay? But I knew what to ask based on the videos. Long story short, those videos are available for pretty much any type of subject we teach or anything we want to learn. So when we assign those videos in the classroom, some of this happen, but it has to happen intentionally. It's not just assign a random lecture and the kids are going to start, oh yeah, the cell division is just really great process. Let me watch a few more videos of this, correct? That doesn't usually happen. Sorry. So what is not the flipped classroom? Oftentimes what we define as the flipped classroom is, let's switch the lectures outside of the classroom. You watch some videos because you really will love the subject if you watch these videos. And then you come back motivated and I'll teach you the rest that you didn't learn. Or you do some homework and you'll be great. But we all know that that doesn't really happen that way. I obviously needed to learn how to swim because I didn't want to drown. I obviously needed to learn how to ski because obviously I didn't want to hurt myself too much as I went to the ski trip. But that was interesting to me. I don't see many kids going to watch lectures in thermodynamics just because they were available in YouTube. So what is the flipped classroom? So yes, you do some activities outside, but what it does is allow the faculty member to tailor and use different strategies to teach the students relevant material. Because yes, there is a chance that the students are going to catch a few things when they go and watch the lectures, but there is a chance that they're not going to pick everything they need in order to do well in your test or in order to become fully engaged with the subject. But what it gives you is the opportunity to filter the material that is very, very, very difficult to understand at their own versus the material that they could probably understand by reading the book and watching the lectures. So allows you to cut some of the pieces that they can do better or they can do just as well by working outside of the classroom. And then for you to tailor individualized instruction or just by simply bringing the most difficult concepts alive in the classroom. So free up a little bit of your time. So I've been doing flipped classroom and a variety of things for many years, and I actually did it accidentally. It wasn't really that I had an interest on doing flipped classroom and flipped learning. In fact, I have a confession to make, even though I'm a huge advocate for technology and a huge advocate for online learning, I was hugely against it when I first became a faculty member. In fact, I was so opposed that I will go to the faculty senate and complain constantly. And I was so opposed that I opposed the creation of the first anatomy and physiology course when I was teaching at Florida State College. But I was so upset that they still created it, and I was so upset because the work was such a subpar piece of work that when the call to redo the course came up, I said, well, I guess since I'm not in agreement with this and I don't like what they did, I should volunteer to make sure the product is of high quality. So they ended up wrapping me into developing a course, and I guess became a believer after we work on it. It's not that the course that I designed was that much better than the one that existed before. It's just that I became engaged in the process and I understood that there are other ways to develop teaching materials. Sorry, ever since my run this morning, I have been coughing. So how did I get into flipped learning? I was teaching anatomy. That's what I used to teach, anatomy and microbiology. And one time, I had to actually miss a week, essentially 2 classes. And I was under the impression that if I didn't show up to the classroom, my students wouldn't learn. And if they didn't hear me speaking, they were going to miss in something really, really, really life-changing, like in something that they could not find anywhere else. I was so convinced that my instruction was so valuable that I literally wouldn't miss a class just because, you know, I was that great. So one time I just could not show up. I think it was like a Monday, Wednesday. So I decided that they still needed a lecture. So I found this lady. She is a faculty member at the University of California, Berkeley. And as you can see, she still teaches with chalk. And to this day, I mean, and this video is 2007, and she's still teaching today. So I put a couple of videos, and I said, well, that's the best I can do. At least they will listen to someone teaching this very, very relevant material that is going to change their life forever. And I came back the following week, said, did you guys watch the lectures? Oh, yeah, we did. Said, okay, do you want me to go over something? You know, the lectures could not be as great as what I do. So they said, no, we're good. She's great. And I was like, what? Yeah, she's amazing. You need to put the rest of her lectures online. We even watched the one for today. And it's like, how come? I mean, she's teaching with chalk, with an skeleton that is worse than the one that I was using. And, you know, why is she any better if I'm in the classroom? No, it's great. She's super clear. She goes through different examples. And the best of all, I can stop it anytime I want, watch it, take notes, and keep going. So I was a little hurt. I have to be honest, my ego was a little hurt because, you know, I thought it was so great, and apparently I wasn't. And they said, we even watched the lecture for today. I cannot get them to read the chapter before they come to class, but somehow she did. So they don't even know her actually. They really connected with that lecture, and they read material for the class that we were going to have that day. So after I got to my initial disappointment and I wiped my tears away, I decided to continue with my lecture that day, and it was great because when I was lecturing, they knew what I was saying, and when I was asking questions, most of them knew what to answer. And it's like, oh, I guess she may be okay. And then I went and started trying to upload the rest of her lectures to Blackboard. That's what we used at the time. And I found apparently there are a lot of other lectures that I needed to watch. And yes, in fact, she was great because I ended up watching a couple of her lectures myself. And even though those lectures are relatively old, people still watch them today. And the comments all are like this. I mean, there are a few that, you know, people that complain about everything, so you cannot fix that. But most comments are what you see here. Everyone really engaged with her. Everyone really likes what she does. And she's a top lecturer and a scientist at UC Berkeley. She has accomplished way more in the field of neuroscience and physiology that I probably will ever do. So why wouldn't my students like her lectures better than me, and why would I force them to just listen to me when my knowledge at the end is relatively limited when you compare to the knowledge that this lady brings to the lectures? And as I watched the lectures, I learned a few other things that she did. She came into the classroom, and rather than start lecturing right away, like many of us do, she took the time to say a few things, and then she will draw a name from her little bag with everyone's names in it, of people present, and she will buy lunch to the student that she pulled out that week. So every lecture she had, she will take those students to lunch to connect with them. So long story short, even her face-to-face students love her. And I think I had a pretty good relation with my students, but not to that extent. But what that did for me was open the doors to start finding information well beyond the classroom to engage them. Because it's not that they like her better, that they wouldn't want to deal with me. That made the connection that I had with them much better, because little by little, my time in the classroom with them got better. And those of you that teach science know that getting that connection with science students is relatively difficult, especially if they are not interested in the subject you're trying to teach them. So the more I developed my use of technology in the classroom, the more my view of how we should teach changed. So educators, us, we're no longer the gatekeeper of information. We're not the sole provider of information anymore. So the students come into the classroom expecting for me to recite the book. That's just that. They could read the book, or they could go and find the lectures of the exact same thing I'm going to do, probably by someone even more qualified online. So they don't need us as a gateway to information any longer. As you see, lectures can be given by superb communicators that are leaders in their field of expertise. And well, we may be superb communicators, we probably are not the leader in our field of expertise. So we can reach out to those experts and bring them in the classroom relatively easily in order to enhance what we do. Just like what my students said, and this is obviously coming now out of a lot of research. Initially, if I would have been smarter, I probably would have done some work with this when I stumbled upon this several years ago, is that they pause the content, they rewind it, they keep it, they do many things with the content that they cannot do with our content when we're in their classroom just doing a straight lecture. And what is even better, students know what they know and know what they don't know. So they can really spend their time honing their skills on the material that they need help with. Because if they come to me and we're doing a general study session, I go over general topics, right? If you're having a small study session with the students, you maybe ask and answer a few questions that may be of great relevance for the students, but here they are in control of what they learn based on what they know that they need to learn. So essentially, you're shifting some of the responsibility of the teaching and learning experience back to the student. For years, we have been having this debate that student success is 100% tied to the faculty in the classroom. And us as faculty somewhat oppose it, but we still accept it because we don't relinquish any control of what is happening in the classroom to put it on the lap of anyone else, including the student. So as a faculty, we said, no, you cannot blame me for the level of readiness that my student brings into the classroom. So that's not fair. But then we don't do anything, really, to shift that to the student and other members of the teaching cohort. So right here, by sending them outside a little bit, we allow them to take that responsibility. Yes, there is something you can do on your level of readiness. Yes, no, I cannot fix all the problems in the classroom, but by switching a little bit of that responsibility, then the student become engaged with the content, with you, and hopefully we'll see better outcomes. So this is what most classrooms look like, right? So standing from, kind of like what I'm doing to you, preaching, but not applying. So you have students doing all kinds of random things. As just by looking from the back, you can see a lot of people with their head downs, not a lot of people writing and so on. And I bet that's what many of our classrooms look like, right? And if we said the lectures in the classroom are no longer what we need, so what are we going to do with the faculty? So if I don't need to have you in the classroom lecturing, what am I going to do with you? What it sort of put me in an uncomfortable situation is that obviously this room is full of faculty. I can still consider myself faculty. I teach as much as I can when I can. And they're so nice. Look, they even take selfies and stuff. They're up with technology. But there is still and always will be room for the faculty in the classroom. The problem is that we need to change the roles a little bit of what we do, right? So having the expert and bringing those lectures, it's only part of learning. Remember my example with the skis? If I didn't ask the people that knew how to ski, regardless of how many times I watched those videos, I probably will have hurt myself on the slopes a lot more than I did to begin with. I probably will not have been able to learn how to swim because even though I knew the moves and what I needed to do, it's not the same when you're working with someone helping you fine-tune your skills. So learning in the classroom by lecturing is only part of the experience. Bringing that video, bringing that expert into the classroom is only part of the experience. What makes the experience in the classroom great is what you do in the classroom, what the faculty member does in the classroom. That is where the value added of education is found. Students don't usually come to your class only because of the content. Most students make some sort of connection with you. And most of them maintain that connection even after they leave your classroom. So thinking that you're not going to be useful in the classroom any longer is just not there. We make those connections with the students. The students need those connections in order to do well. So the shift between the classroom that I showed you before and this classroom is huge. Students are engaged, right? Faculty member can go between the different tables as much as needed. And if they have prepared prior to coming to the lecture, this faculty member will be able to tailor the material that is going to be covered that day a lot better than if we're going to just recite a whole chapter. Chances are, if they read and they watched some of those videos, they got something out of the chapter. And we know, based on our professional expertise, that there are specific topics on chapters that the students have more problems with. Like when I was teaching, for instance, masophysiology, there was a section there that was the explanation of the sliding filament, essentially how a muscle contracts, that the students always have difficulties with. That was the hardest part of that chapter. But because of the volume of the chapter, before I ran into this type of technology substitutes, I didn't spend any more time in that topic than I spent in other topics of masophysiology. So even though I knew that that was the hardest part because of the time constraint, I went through the material in the same exact way I went when I was explaining something that I knew the students will get. But by doing this, I changed the way that I was delivering this content significantly. Because by having the students work with the material outside and have a basic understanding of masophysiology before they came into the classroom, I was able to spend the whole hour on the sliding filament theory. And as a result, about the second time I did it, when I found a way to do it a little better, my test scores increased. Because I was able to identify the need of the student rather than go through the material in the same exact way. So lectures always will have a place in higher ed. I'm not trying to tell you that lectures are bad, you should not be lecturing. It's what we lecture, how we lecture it, and when. Not every class should be a lecture, not every topic is a lecture, right? And if it needs to be, you can actually switch some of those pieces outside and do other type of engaging activities in the classroom. Lectures are pretty interesting, especially if you're a good lecturer. But not all of us are great lecturers. There are lecturers that you just sit there and you can just sit there for hours and they're so great that you just sit there. But there are some that are not. So there is some research that shows the interaction of a classroom with a lecturer. And usually what you find when you track the data of interaction is there's always one group of people that interact with the lecturer and the rest of the classroom is missing interaction. Next time you're lecturing, just pay attention to the people that will respond to your lecture. And you will find that it's always usually the same group of people. And the more engaged you are, the more energized as a lecturer you become, but the less disengaged the rest of your class become. But we don't see that until someone shows it to us, because we, at that point, determined that we had a great lecture that day. So this, hopefully, is what the students should be doing outside of the classroom before they come in. They're so excited watching that lecture, coming into the classroom, ready to learn. She's not going through Facebook or anything like that. She's just trying to learn before she comes into the classroom. So where you can find great lectures, like there are 3 examples right here. These 3 guys are essentially one of the top scholars in their fields, right? So you may have seen some of these, but if I was teaching physics, I probably wouldn't be able to do this in my classroom. It'll play eventually. Missing the sound.
There's no sound that's going out of this. I'm sorry.
Nope.
From 1 meter height, and you would be there and it would hit you, you'd be dead. 150 joules is enough to kill you. They use these devices, called a whack-a-mole. They use them to demolish buildings. You lift up a very heavy object, even heavier than this, and then you let it go, you swing it, thereby converting gravitational potential energy into kinetic energy, and that way you can demolish a building. You just let it hit, and it breaks a building. That's the whole idea of wrecking. So you're using then the conversion of gravitational potential energy to kinetic energy. Now, I am such a strong believer of the conservation of mechanical energy that I am willing to put my life on the line. If I release that bob from a certain height, then that bob can never come back to a point where the height is any larger. If I release it from this height and it swings, then when it reaches here, it could not be higher. There is a conversion from gravitational potential energy to kinetic energy back to gravitational potential energy, and it will come to a stop. And when it swings back, it should not be able to reach any higher, provided that I do not give this object the initial speed when I stand here. I trust the conservation of mechanical energy for 100%. I may not trust myself. I'm going to release this object, and I hope I will be able to do it at 0 speed, so that when it comes back, it may touch my chin, but it may not crush my chin. I want you to be extremely quiet, because this is no joke. If I don't succeed in giving it 0 speed, then this will be my last lecture. I will close my eyes. I don't want to see this. please be very quiet. We didn't sleep all night. 3, 2, 1, 0. Physics works, and I'm still alive. See you Wednesday.
So, of course, that is, if I was teaching physics, that was probably a lecture that I couldn't match, right? Given the physical constraints that we have in our classrooms and so on and so forth, and probably some OSHA regulations that I don't know what they are, and probably the error for mistake because probably the pendulum wasn't installed in the proper way and so on. But those are things that you'll find available online, and as you see, there is a very good connection there. He's retired now out of MIT. He was there 40-some years. And his lectures are watched 2 million times a year since they were published. Recently, in interest of full disclaimer, so you may not want to use him in your classroom, he was in a bit of a situation. So his title of Professor Emeritus of MIT was removed for some claims of sexual harassment. Even then, when his popularity dropped, his lectures still viewed 1.5 million times as of this past weekend. So you may not want to use him in your classroom based on all this, but the example of the power of having extremely well-developed lectures is clear right here. He is not a popular person anymore, and still he gets 1.5 million viewings. His lectures were removed out of the MIT and TDX site, and people still go and find them in YouTube because they're that great. So this is the type of examples that you can bring into your classroom. Not his specifically, but you know. This is a video that came recently, I believe a week or so ago, from CNNBC, and we're just having some issues with the sound, so I'll tell you sort of what it means, what it says. But essentially, most classrooms in elementary are flipped today. Most of the education for these kids are happening in the way that I describe, especially in the top-performing schools. So what's going to happen in 20 years when those students get to our classrooms? Are we going to reverse in time what they do and make sure we look like this? Or are we going to make sure we have arrangements like this? Because they're going to be expecting it. So when I said it's not ubiquitous in higher education, it's because it is becoming ubiquitous in the early grades, and they are having extremely good results. And you know that once those kids get to middle school, the expectation is the middle school works this way. And when they get to high school, the same thing. And when they get to college, obviously, it's our responsibility, essentially, to make sure that the learning environment is up to par, rather than hoping that they go back and default to a traditional method of education. So all this is about videos as to this point, and not everything is about videos when you're talking about flipped classroom. There are a million of things that you can do, and we'll go over a couple in the next 10 minutes or so. So you have online journals and textbooks that are fully online, that are open to anyone to use, and you're starting to see the quality of the OER materials increase dramatically. And you're starting to see the cost of the textbook increase dramatically as well. At some point, it's going to get to a juncture in which we need to say, yeah, $250 for a chemistry book that I'm going to use once is really, really not okay. Because when we're faculty, you know, we just pick the book, we not really know exactly how much it's worth, but we pick the book because it's probably the best book that we have. But then on the flip side, you have the student trying to access that material, that book. And they have no access to the content that you're going to cover unless you open the gate to something that is more accessible like this. So the example, for instance, the director of open access journals, peer-reviewed journals, they have gone through a very different process so you can access for free online. There are a lot of journals that we have today. The odd part of that is they have been funded with taxpayer money, but in order for you to access the actual papers, you have to pay for it. These are not. OER books. There are some that are sketchy, but there are some that are relatively good. So, for instance, in my current institution, we have a business program that is quite successful, and they switched about a year or so ago to OER materials and build some supplements in order to make them better. Over the last year and a half, by going to OER, they have saved students about $750,000. When you serve a population like the population of students that come through my institution, the textbook is more of an issue in the classroom than the cost of the tuition. I think our credit hour is like under $50, but then when you have to pay for a textbook, $300, $400, and $500, some students go through the classroom without a book because they cannot get it. This not only saving the money, but it's giving them the opportunity to access the material ahead of time. One of the #1 issues that the students failed their first quiz or test, any guesses? No book, right? They come in the first week of class with no book. Some by choice, some because they can buy it until the second week. Flatware. This is a very interesting concept, has evolved quite a bit. And they do, obviously, digital textbooks. And there are some open books, and there are some customizable books. So you have to pay for it, but they are a significantly lower rate than what you will pay through the publisher. So if you teach in a class, and out of that class, you're only covering 10 chapters of 30 of this expensive book, here you can customize something that is electronically accessible for the students for a lower cost. They have fully developed courses that you can access that way, and obviously personalized learning platform to help with remediation skills. Online chat tools that are built for questions, notes, and interactive materials. So you have something that is called My Primary Pad. It's relatively inexpensive, a subscription. I think a lifetime subscription is like $50 or something like that. And if you have it, you can interact with your students. If you're an English professor, your students could be typing there. And if you have office hours, you can be in your office and the student be at home. If they are working through these and you're logged in at the same time, you could make corrections and suggestions actually immediately. Or you can use that as a writing tool in the classroom and be able to see what the different students are doing. The good old Google Docs, it works pretty well for outside activities. And the biggest one, that is data analytics. So we always talk a lot about data. The issue is that usually we don't collect actionable data. Actionable data in the classroom and in the flipped classroom is actually the key of having a successful classroom. It's not only data at the end of the semester. It's what is happening today that will help you do better tomorrow. That is actionable data. So you can obviously get meaningful insights of what the students are currently doing. Then you can actually show them the dashboard, so when they log in, they know exactly where they are, and when they see this big red mark, they know they're failing. And by you using the evidence right here to transform the way you teach, you should have better outcomes in your classroom. The typical example of these, and there are a lot, but I'm going to use my math lab as a typical example, is because it's probably my math lab and my physics lab are probably the ones that have the most robust platforms for data, give you things like this. So you design your assignments, you attach them to student learning outcomes, and the exercises are given and connected to a student learning outcome. You can very quickly see how much time the student spent compared to the grade. And there's probably no surprise to anyone that the student that spent the most time obviously was the student essentially with the highest grade. And when you look big sets of data, that is essentially the consistency you're going to see. You're going to find some outliers here and there, but usually the students that spend the time practicing, they end up getting better results at the end. And this is huge when you do flipped classrooms, because you know what they're doing outside, so you know what to do when they get into the classroom. Then you can very quickly take a quick glance at how they did in a particular assessment, right? So you can see how many students that you have score below 70, between 70 to 79, and above 80, and so on, right? And you can click in one of these, and it will tell you which students, which questions they missed, and a further click will tell you which areas within the chapter is the areas that they struggle with. So when you look at the data, you can essentially build a personalized study plan like this. Not every study plan will look the same because it's personalized, right? So that's what the instructor comes in. You're the expert, and by using this data, you can say, hey, you have issues with problem solving, fractions, real number systems, and inequalities. But probably I don't, so for me, no reason to get a study plan like this. My study plan will look a little different because maybe I have issues factoring. So as an instructor, I think this is the most powerful piece, real data, that we can have in order to make our flipped classrooms more successful. So with the help of all the different tools, once you get here, you're definitely changing the experience of your student in the classroom and changing your position from the gatekeeper to the facilitator of learning. So all what we have talked about come down to a flexible environment. So I need to be okay not being the center of attention in the classroom. I need to be fine with that. Changing the learning culture. The student needs to be fine understanding that if someone isn't standing in front of them lecturing for hours and end, it's fine. You can also learn by doing hands-on activities, by reading outside of the classroom. The content, intentional, and that's where the data comes from. You arrange the data, you learn about your students and their behavioral patterns when they are outside of the classroom, and when they come in, you have a plan that works for them. Obviously, they take a lot more preparation than just showing up and lecturing, but it does definitely transform what you do. And obviously, the role of the faculty in a flipped classroom is not the gatekeeper of information. Essentially, it's the person that helps those students learn the information in a way that works for them. This is what the workplace is looking like today. Before I left Florida several years ago, sort of like this was the office where my instructional designers work. Open spaces, a lot of collaboration, a lot of talking. There was not independent offices for them. And that's how they designed it. No, there wasn't like me not giving them an office. They wanted a huge room in which they had open spaces. And this is me. So if you have any questions, we have a couple of minutes. If not, you can always email me, and I'll be sure to get back to you. Thank you. Yes.
So I teach in the humanities, and I teach everything online. And I'm thinking I need the video that tells me how to ask the right data questions. Because at this point, I'm not collecting and analyzing data.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to me like it's a science in and of itself. Like, what is the question? What is the piece of information I could not only show my job review committee, but that would actually help me in instructing a humanities class? Right, so I have math book envy right now. And I'm thinking, so do you have any advice for how to start
The first thing that comes to mind, and I think what you're saying is it's actually a very, very valid question, and a question that most of us struggle with. The time where I personally learned how to, as you said, ask the right question was when I designed that online course. And let me explain you why. Because I was forced by Mike Harrington, I'll never forget his name because I fought with him almost daily every time we met, an instructional designer. He was forcing me to have learning outcomes and then start attaching what I do to the learning outcomes. So essentially, he asked me, what do you want your students to learn at the end of the class? And then he asked me to build the class backwards. I was so upset because it's like, why are you asking me that question? Everything in this book is important. But that's how I started collecting my data. So the first thing I did, I created those specific learning outcomes, attached my lectures and my activities to those, and as the students took those quizzes, my quizzes were connected to whatever objectives I had, and then initially, today you obviously don't have to do that, manually, I went and eliminated questions the most students didn't get. And my next lectures had less pieces of what people actually get easy and more of what they don't. So what I'm telling you essentially is to look at your class from the end and walk your way back to the beginning. It's work, but one is rewarding, and it does change significantly how your course look today versus what they will look tomorrow, and it will narrow the amount of lecturing you do in the classroom. Did I answer your question?
Any other questions?
So what do you think about asking the students to do short presentations in this environment? Is it a good thing to do, or?
Yes, it is, actually. I cut it out of the presentation, but there is a tool that allows students to have video microblogging, essentially. So they go back and forth asking questions to each other, and you chime in every so frequently. So you essentially insert a topic of conversation and make the students responsible for developing that topic. You can embed the microblogging feature either into your LMS or have it as a standalone website. It's free, and I think it's called Today's Meet.
Is that M-E-A-T or M-E-E-T?
M-E-E-T, Today's Meet. And you create it there, so you essentially formulate topics, and you can close or open the classroom as long as you want. There are people that use that tool in regular classrooms, so rather than always lecturing, they have the students working in smaller groups, and then they have them working together at the same time through the computer. So we could all be sitting here, and you could be working on one topic, another topic, but then the whole classroom also has an assignment that connects all topics together, and they interact online in the same classroom. There are other people that just leave it open, let's say a whole weekend, and they put a specific parameters. But yes, microvlogging, yes, great idea to have them do presentations or live presentations or outside engagement with microvlogging.
Thank you, Jose, for such a great talk.
Thank you.
My question is, I saw a New York Times article, maybe other people saw it, that they actually did a study, and there is a group that seems to do best with a lecture, and that is privileged white males. What surprised me about that story was that anybody got. I mean, the lecture format works for anybody.
Yeah.
And I thought that was kind of curious. But it also gives, it gives a social dimension to the classroom. My question is about the social dimension, to flipping the classroom. How you feel about that, what you might have witnessed yourself, but especially as you move from being a lecturer to flipping the classroom, what does this do for inclusivity and access?
That is a very good question, and yes, I read a little bit about that on the New York Times, and essentially, what that translates to is the traditional method of instruction. They do privilege a specific group of people, and essentially is white males, as you mentioned. But what it comes next after that is the inclusive models like flipping the classroom, external support in the classroom, invasive tutoring and so on, do serve all equally. So even the people that do better on traditional lectures will even perform at a higher level by inclusiveness, because allow them to have what you said, the social experience to interact with others. So the content does not come only from me, but the explanations come from their peers as well. So to me, in my personal experience, by incorporating technology in the classroom, what I found is that the quiet student wasn't so quiet, that they just didn't feel comfortable speaking. And having been in institutions relatively diverse, and now in a very diverse institution, there are many people like me, they have an accent, but unlike me, I don't care to have an accent. There's many of them that do, and they don't want to speak in public because they feel embarrassed. But they type just fine, right? So these allow others that are shy, or they may be more thoughtful in the way that they answer questions, to submit their questions or to submit their ideas in a way that is safer, or that they feel safer. So it changes the dynamics of the course, because you cannot just hide in the corner any longer. You can clearly tell who is participating and who isn't.
I have a question back here first. Oh, you didn't?
I would just like your comments on the, I guess you could call it the social justice issue of broadband access and the cost of it in terms of money cost. And if we're assuming that students have access to enough data to watch a video, for example, which is pretty data heavy. Yep. Just your comments on that, because it seems to be an issue to me.
It is, and that's why I mentioned that not everything needs to be video-based. There are a lot of things, like accessing, for instance, my MATLAB. Those are things that you could do on campus, and the faculty member, essentially the responsibility at that point to harvest that information and use it goes back to the faculty member. And of course, videos are an issue on areas with lack of broadband. But many years ago, for instance, the University of Nebraska at Kearney, they serve a very rural area, and what they have been doing is they package everything and mail it as part of the materials to the student. Or when they come in, they'll get the CDs burned or copy into flash drives, and they get to use those. That will require a lot of extra preparation, but there are ways to get around. And Kearney has been doing that for, I don't know, 8, 10 years maybe. I'm not sure what they have done newer to facilitate access, but the first time they got around that was by collecting all that information that they were going to use for the semester, packaging it, and either mailing it to the student ahead of time for like a nominal fee. It was essentially mailing costs, and or allowing the students to pick it up on campus so they have the access for those students that live in areas with no broadband. But
It seems like it's important for us to also advocate for better access for everybody.
correct. Yes. I mean, the idea will be, the idea would be to have access, because yes, mailing is a good way to get around it, but we all teach, and sometimes we run into things that are extremely good and relevant at the last minute, and if I don't have the broadband where I live, then I don't have access to that piece of information that may have been the hook for me, right? So yes, it is definitely an issue. There are ways to minimize it, as I described, by packaging the material earlier, or loading all the material into mobile devices, right? but it's still an issue in some areas. You're completely right.
Jose, if I could just comment on that. Governor Meades has a giant initiative of about $150 million to expand broadband across the state of Wyoming. In fact, the 4th annual broadband conference will be later in October if you're interested in that. They made great strides in some of these little dinky towns that we have around here with this rural population. So there has been government, at least in this state, taking that up, and it's a great question. Thank you. Are there any other questions?
I don't need the microphone.
Yeah, you do. For the
Do I?
line people.
Oh, for the line people, thank you. This is more of a comment. I think the issue goes beyond net equality. And I think we're facing some political issues now around access and copyright issues. And there are some universities, like you mentioned, MIT and Harvard, going toward open access, but there are a lot of others that are trying to close it down and monetize it. So, just a comment.
Yep. And you see that also on the private business. I mean, Pearson builds great materials, and they always have. In fact, it is still ahead, but their cost is astronomical. Obviously, building high-quality materials is expensive, but they are migrating from a concept of this is a textbook to this is all interactive, which leads into buying access codes. And your access codes are only good for a specific period of time. So essentially, what they're doing is closing the market to the content by embedding the media in the content, which is a problem, especially for most students. I mean, most of our students, I think, is about, I can't remember the exact number, but there is a significant percentage of college-age students, or their graduate especially, they go through college right at or slightly below poverty level. So accessing that type of information is very costly for them. That's why you see a lot of big corporations behind the OER projects.
Any other questions? We have time for one or two more.
Just hopping on the social justice technology bandwagon, let's also, think about issues of monetization of student data, which is something, something also worth thinking about in the same sort of basket of issues that as students are using these online tools, whoever's the provider of those tools is benefiting in some way, probably, right? So, not saying it's an evil. It's definitely something, as we encourage students to be mindful and info literate, we ourselves should be too.
You're right.
Okay, thank you very much, Jose.
Thank you very much. Thank you.